Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Richard Allen Turner. I'm a board-certified pediatrician. Welcome to my channel, Kids Info Network Dayton. I hope you enjoy the show. Focus Kids is coming right up. Hey everyone, Dr. T, I'm back, and Dr. Tronick and Dr. Gold are going to talk about good enough parenting today. So let's get right to it. Good enough parenting. Chapter 2 is one of my favorites in the book, The Power of Discord, because it doesn't just give parents permission to not be perfect, but it actually, in my mind, encourages parents not to worry so much about needing to be perfect. Dr. Tronick, what the heck is meant by good enough parenting?
Good enough parenting is a way of thinking about the way real parenting occurs moment by moment in an ongoing kind of way. And it's a recognition that one cannot be perfect. It is simply not possible to be the perfect parent. That in our terms, parenting is a process that involves matching and mismatching and messiness. Uh, but the implication is that by being good enough, you're being good enough in terms of how your child is going to develop and how they're going to move forward, and how you're going to have a really positive and a positive relationship with the child. It also has another quality, which I'm not sure, Claudia can comment on this, but I'm not sure Winnicott focused on it so much, is that good enough parenting implies that there isn't one way to parent. We have lots of books and people making statements that you should parent this way or that way or some particular kind of way. Or I'm sure as a pediatrician you experience thinking, oh, is this parent who comes from a different culture and ethnic background doing something that's really okay to do, or shouldn't they be doing X, Y, or Z? I think the idea of good enough parenting says there's a whole variety and a whole variation in the way parenting can occur that leads to and produces typical and normal development. That there isn't a singular way, and that there are varieties of really effective ways to parent.
And why is good enough actually, in a sense, pretty perfect? Dr. Gold.
That's a nice way of putting it. Okay. So, I think if you think about the baby comes into the world, they don't have a sense, of who they are. And that is their job, is to kind of grow and figure out who they are in their particular culture and their particular family, who they are as a separate person from their various caregivers. And the idea of the good enough mother is that their sense of self needs a space in which to develop. And that space is in the inevitable errors that parents make in misreading their baby's cues or not being right there. And so if there are no errors, then it gets in the way of the baby's developing their sense of self. So that's where that idea that it's really essential. It's not only okay, it's essential for a child's development for there to be what Winnicott called them failures. I think that's kind of, people like bristle at that word, but I think it's as long as you get what he means, it's okay. Like, you will fail, you will not know, and you'll get it wrong, and then you'll fix it. And that's why if you want to do that kind of play on words, that being the good enough parent is in a sense perfect.
And you kind of touched on it, but is the pursuit of perfection potentially problematic, and if so, how? And you kind of already touched on it, but go into a little more detail, if you will.
Well, you know, when you have a parent who's extremely anxious and needs everything to be exactly just so all the time, first of all, that's very stressful on the parent, and that kind of anxiety gets then communicated to the baby, but then they don't get a chance to experience themselves having the capacity to be okay. So they learn that they can handle themselves in the world, and that sort of links back to the earlier conversation about self-regulation, is that they learn that they can self-regulate because they have those little micro opportunities to do it, and then eventually those, along with their development, those failures get proportionately bigger, and so eventually they can grow up and leave home and have a partner and have their own children. So that's how you want it to work in the ideal world.
There's a broader problem with perfection, certainly in parenting, but it probably is true for many things, is that if you think there is a perfect way to parent, in the first place, it means you're only doing one set of things. And it's very unlikely that one set of things really map that well onto the variety of experiences that people will have. And the second thing is, if you really hold on, if you're a parent and you're really holding on to the idea of there's a perfect way to do things, you will inevitably face really big failures. Failures that lead you to question your capacity. If we're talking about postpartum depression, it will lead you into the feeling that you're really depressed because you are unable to carry out that perfect, that singular way of being. So I think that's true no matter what you're doing in the world, but one needs to have an appreciation of the mismatching, the matching, the repairs, and the dynamics of that process over time. And locking oneself into the one way is highly problematic.
Is being a parent and being a good enough parent kind of like the ultimate test in flexibility?
I think that when you have that experience of going through a difficult moment and getting to the other side, then when you get to another difficult moment, you kind of can go through it. Whereas if you don't know what's going to happen and you're afraid, then that's where the kind of bracing and the rigidity and the inflexibility can come in. So from that's looking at it kind of from the child's perspective. But I think good enough parenting is more about being forgiving of yourself. I think is probably a better word than flexible. I think knowing that you're going to make mistakes and not, plunging into depression because you lost your cool, but rather regrouping and saying, I'm sorry, I lost my cool, and let's try it again.
And we've mentioned tantrums, touched on tantrums a bit. And Dr. Brazelton said just before a surge in any line of development, the child's behavior seems to fall apart. Why are these nearly complete and utter meltdowns, while exhausting and exasperating for parents, why are they so important for a child's development?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that it gives a child, well, a young child is kind of beginning to get their sense of what's okay, what's not, you know, how much do I have control over things, how much am I helpless to the power of the big people. And so that's what a tantrum is. It's kind of an expression of helplessness. And I think when they see that the people who care for them can kind of hang in there with them when they're at their worst, then that can lead to a moment of growth for both people in the relationship.
And Dr. Tronick, how can it help parents to get through this stage, the terrible twos, or I actually like to call it the terrible toddlers, because it doesn't stop. It doesn't start with 2 and end with 3. How can understanding good enough, the concept of good enough parenting, how can it help parents get through this whole toddler stage?
The toddler stages is an absolutely wonderful stage. You're seeing all these aspects of development. You're watching this little person struggle with all sorts of issues. You know, the unfortunate part is that a lot of the struggles become difficult for the parent to deal with. But I think Claudia's idea, and something that she makes, I think, wonderfully clear in her earlier books, is to try, as the parent, to see what it is that the child is experiencing. What is going on in the mind of the child? Is it some kind of total confusion about what to do? Is it a feeling of helplessness? For example, for adults now, certainly I experience this with the COVID crisis. There's enormous uncertainty, and it's very hard to not only make sense of what is going to happen, but where do I fit into this current reality, and where do I fit into what is a completely unknown reality that I'm going to be confronted with at some point in time in the future, and we don't even know what that time is. That for me is a state that I find very disorganizing and disruptive of myself, and it leads me unfortunately to kind of feel flattened, and it also puts me on edge at the same time. Well, what if you're a toddler and you're looking around in the world, and forget about the COVID world, you're looking around at the world, and everything is, so much of it is new to you. There are new people that you're dealing with. There are new friends. You're in a new environment. One day at home, the next day you're at school. Your schedule is going in all sorts of different directions. Plus, you internally are changing. You're beginning to understand more about the world. You're developing language, but the words don't always work. You can't find the words. There's just an enormous amount of turmoil that's going on that is leading to growth, is leading toward a direction, but you as a toddler have no idea what that direction is. And it's the burden of parents to come to an understanding of that, and to give the child by holding them, and you talked about earlier about regulating them and taking care of them, and giving the child a sense of hope about what's going to be coming, that this is going to get better, that the parent can bring to the child, and the child is really unable to bring to themselves.
I think it's absolutely stunning and remarkable that you go from 18 months speaking maybe 8 to 10 words, and 6 months later by 2, at least 50 in a typically developing child, to even 200 words in such a short time. It just blows my mind.
It is mind blowing. But I think there's often a problem that comes with that. That for the toddler who now has 200 words, and I live in a neighborhood where 200 words would be seen as falling behind developmentally. One of the problems that toddler feels is that the words that they have don't connect necessarily to their experience, that they can't fully express themselves in words, that their body is feeling something and they're searching around for words, and they might have the word I'm sad or I'm angry or whatever, but it doesn't fully convey the feeling. And on the parent side, the words are deceptive. The parents often accept that the words that the child is using really tell them the full experience the child is having. I'm unhappy, I'm sad, I'm whatever. The words do carry some meaning, but the potential for a mismatch between what the child is trying to express and what the parent is able to decipher in what's going on is often a big mismatch. And we see it with parents who are saying, how do I talk to about COVID with my child? Well, it really depends on the age of the child. You have a 2-year-old or a 2.5-year-old has a lot of words about fear and stuff like that. The child doesn't need to hear the explanation about the virus. It might be good to say something about it. What they want to know is that they're going to be safe and secure and you're going to protect them. And that's different than a 7-year-old. But the 7-year-old also needs to hear that you're going to make them safe and protect them. So the development of language and words is astonishing. And at the same time, it is one of the places where you see a mismatch between the experience of the child, the experience of the parent, and what they're able to understand about each other.
So let's sum up good enough parenting, why it's actually really ideal and how it fosters growth and development in infants and children, and how it gives confidence to both parents and children. Dr. Gold, we'll start with you.
I'd like to give credit where credit is due, in that the term good enough mother comes from D.W. Winnicott, who was a psychoanalyst and a pediatrician. And his really brilliant insights about human nature came from this combination of working with parents and infants on a day-to-day basis, right, in the moment-to-moment development, while at the same time working with his adult patients who would lie on the couch, and although they were adults and they had adult language, in relation to him, they would regress to kind of behave in relation to him as babies. So he put these two things together, and that's where a lot of his wisdom comes from. And the idea of the good enough mother is that, as I said earlier, that it's essential that the mother or the caregivers fail to meet the baby's needs in proportion to their developmental ability to tolerate it, because it's in that failure that the baby and the young child and the older child develop a robust sense of themselves in the world and a hopeful kind of way of being.
And picking up on that in terms of his analytic insight and his therapeutic insight with adults was the recognition, and he used the word failures, but what we might call the mismatches that occur between the therapist and the individual patient are the context in which when the repair occurs between them, because there will be inevitable mismatches between the therapist and the patient, just like there are inevitable mismatches between the parent and the child, that in the repair, the patient comes to know and gain a sense of agency. They gain a sense, again, of connection with the therapist. They come to know that, oh, we can sort of screw up, we can have negative exchanges, and nonetheless hold on to and come to a new and positive feeling about one another. And for the patient, those are really powerful lessons that help them to overcome whatever the particular issues that they're having. And that, I think, is what the good enough parent is doing with the child. The child is doing something. The child knows or hardly knows, depending on their age, what it is that they're doing, what they're struggling with, and the parent engages with them, possibly mismatching and then matching, and together the parent and the child move forward, and the child gains a sense of, oh, we can move forward, we can be connected, I can deal with this situation, I can really overcome it. And then development moves forward in a way that may look messy, but it's moving toward more and more advanced and more complex ways of being in the world.
Dr. Gold, Dr. Tronick, thank you again for your excellent insights and expertise, and I thank you once again for being on the show. And now for my final thoughts. It's not only impossible to be a perfect parent, it's not necessary to be perfect. And trying to be perfect will hinder your child's development as well as stifle the growth and development of the parent-child relationship. So being good enough isn't really just good enough. It's actually pretty perfect. So go ahead and be imperfect, make mistakes, and through those mistakes, you'll watch your child blossom and bloom and develop into a pretty amazing person. The brilliant pediatrician, the late Dr. T. Barry Brazelton, beautifully observed, quote, "Parents don't make mistakes because they don't care, but because they care so deeply," unquote. Thanks again to Dr. Tronick and Dr. Gold for their expertise and wonderful insights. Don't forget to check out the links below to their other works. They're excellent reads for parents and professionals alike. And if you like this video, please like and subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss an episode. And if you didn't like the video, well, there's that other button too, I guess. If you have a suggestion for an episode or topic you'd like to see on the show, or you just want to leave a comment, I'd love to hear from you, so drop a line in the comments below. I'm Dr. T. Thanks so much for watching. That's another episode of Focus Kids. And as always, until the next one, I'll catch you on the flip side. We're out.